What am I saying again?
This is MPW.
MPW.
The podcast.
With your host,
Xylo Aria. Cool.
A podcast about music production
for the everyday musician,
where we learn from experienced studio engineers and each other.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of the MPW Podcast. I'm your host, Xylo Aria, and today we are talking to Caroline Tew. So Caroline is a product manager at Focusrite for the Claret range and also previously worked at SSL, and she is also an artist and songwriter. So amazing to have you today, Caroline. Hello.
Hi, thank you for having me. Great to be here.
Yeah. So what's your day been like so far? Have you done much this morning?
Not too much so far. So I've just had one meeting so far, and then it's still quite early over here. So I haven't got into the day of meetings yet.
Oh, that's good. That's good. Yeah. Get a bit intense when there's too many meetings in one day, I always feel.
Yes, lots of time on Zoom at the moment.
Oh, yeah. Yep. I know the feeling. Do you have some more things that you're working on today, or are you working on any personal projects of your own?
Yeah, so I've been trying to record a bit more of my own music as well. So it's something I've just been starting recently during the lockdown. That's been one of my kind of lockdown projects. So I've been setting up my sort of home studio in here, trying to get some recordings done. So I've done one thing already where I released a song on a compilation album with some other friends
Awesome.
that was done for charity during the lockdown. So that was really fun. So just been trying to do a bit more music really, and kind of use a lot of the equipment that I've got in this room.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, I can see some gear behind you. Is that some like outboard stuff?
Yeah, so I have an Avalon 737 SP channel strip, which is a really nice mic preamp and compressor. I use that quite a lot. And then I also have quite a lot of different Focusrite interfaces, obviously, since I'm working from home.
Yeah.
I've got a few different options in here as well. So the one that I use the most is the 8 Pre X that I've got connected to my iMac. So that's the one I've been using the most. But at the moment, I'm using a 2 Pre USB to do this recording. So,
oh, nice!
Lots of different options.
Yeah. No, that's cool. And it's nice to hear that you're kind of making the most of the lockdown time, because I think people have been either finding it really productive or really hard to be productive. So
yeah, it's really funny because I think for the beginning I was finding it really hard to be productive because it was just such a shock, it was so different. But it took a bit of time, but now I feel like, okay, I've got all this time, I've got all this equipment, I'm sat at home, like, why don't I do something with this? I think it's taken some people a bit of time to get settled with it, but it's been amazing to see everybody's creative lockdown projects, and there's so much extra creativity that everyone has unleashed in themselves, which I think is amazing. I just really hope that when everything goes back to normal, this continues, because there's so much more creativity in the world now than there was before, and I just don't want to see us lose that.
Oh, definitely. And I guess we were talking before about how this seems to always happen later in the night, which can be a little bit disruptive to working lives.
Yeah, absolutely. So when I was at university, I used to stay up till like 2 or 3 in the morning every night making music, doing projects for university and things like that. And that just was my schedule. And I was just used to that. And then when I started working, obviously the working day starts at normal time, not at like midday. So I had to like change a lot. So yeah, I always find that though, I'm writing a song, I'm like getting into the mood, and then I realize it's like 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock or something. And I'm like, oh, but I've got the creative zone now. I want to keep that going. But I also have to go to work tomorrow. So, gosh. As I really need to learn how to be creative in the morning, but it's not something that's ever worked for me. And maybe it's not something, it must happen for some people.
Yeah. I've heard actually that if you make it a routine, then it does work. But no, I'm completely in your boat. Like, I've never been a morning creative person. I mean, when we say morning, if we say between like 2 a.m. and 5 a.m, then yes, but no.
Yeah.
Not the normal morning.
It was funny at university as well because I just got so used to it because at Berkeley the studios that they have are so busy that the only time you get to use them is kind of in the middle of the night. So you can book special practice time in the studios, but that only starts at 6 p.m. and ends, I think, like 6 a.m. or something. So you can book these slots overnight. So you just kind of had to do that because otherwise you didn't get into the studio.
Oh my God,
So,
I love it.
yeah, I mean, yeah, if you really wanted to spend a lot of time in the studio and not wait till the weekend, then you had to go in the middle of the night. And I just got really used to it. And yeah, I did write a song once in the morning. Before work once. I was incredibly impressed.
Wow.
But it's not a common occurrence.
Yeah, no, in the same boat. So today we are talking about audio interfaces, something that you have lots of knowledge to give us today. So we will get into that, but I would love to hear a bit more about your journey into the music world. So I guess in the area of kind of production and engineering, there are not too many women kind of involved in that area, but I'm sure in the area of actually creating and developing the products in the tech side of music, there's probably even less. I mean, I don't know, but I'm just guessing. Has that been kind of your experience?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's a real shame that there aren't more women in the industry, in all parts of the industry. But yes, it's definitely something that is an issue in engineering as well as audio. So there's not a huge number of women in the industry, but I would love to see that change.
Yeah. So how did it all start for you, and how did you get some interest in the area?
So originally I was a musician, so I've always done a bit of music ever since I was a child. I used to sing and play various instruments and things like that. And then I kind of wanted to be a songwriter. That was the thing I wanted to do. So I would write my own music and play them in local venues and things like that. You know, nothing too big, but just small scale.
Yeah.
So when I went to university, I wanted to find somewhere that would let me do songwriting. And at the time, there weren't loads of good options in the UK for like a songwriting degree. Mm-hmm. There's much, much more now. So I ended up going to Berklee College of Music in the US, in Boston. So I did songwriting there for a bit. And then after a few years there, I met some people who worked in the music production major. And I had really done very little to do with audio technology at all until that point. So it was only just meeting those people. And Berklee had and still has this amazing group of studios that have these huge consoles in them, and just kind of getting to experience that, I was like, wow, this is really cool. I need to do this. And
yeah.
So I kind of taught myself Pro Tools and then got onto that sort of specialism within my degree and ended up kind of focusing on that after that.
Cool. So that was kind of through the degree then. So before that, you hadn't really touched this area much?
Yeah, no, not loads really. I did a little bit at school, but I didn't really know what I was doing, to be honest. And I didn't really understand how it all worked. So I probably came into it a bit later than most people.
Yeah, which is cool actually, because I think some people have this idea that either you are a kind of techie person or you're not, but you know, it seems to be something that you can kind of develop an interest for if you're around it, even if you think it's not ingrained in who you are. And I think that was the thing for me.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. I definitely didn't know very much about computers or technology or anything when I was younger. And I, wasn't very interested in like physics and maths at school. And so it did kind of it did develop. So I definitely think that's true.
That's awesome. And now you're kind of building audio interfaces, which is so cool.
yeah, it's a big change.
Yeah. No, that's cool. So we're talking about audio interfaces and how they work, but I think some people kind of are not really sure of what exactly it is. So do you have a bit of like a summary definition for us?
Yeah, it's not something that everyone knows how to define really well. So essentially, an audio interface is the piece of audio equipment that allows you to connect microphones and speakers to your computer so that you can record and listen to music. essentially. So microphones and speakers tend to work with analog audio, and your computer works with digital audio. So the audio interface kind of turns analog audio into digital audio so your computer can understand it. And then also when you're listening, it turns the digital audio from the computer into analog so that your speakers can understand it, and then you can listen to the music. So that's essentially what it does.
Yeah, cool. I think that's a really nice definition, and yeah, makes it kind of clear in my head, which is cool.
It's that thing that you have that's difficult to define, but it's always there. It's like
yeah, cool. I guess there are certain elements that you'll find in most audio interfaces. So can you categorize them into, the main things that make up an audio interface?
Yeah, absolutely. So I mentioned already the conversion from the analog to the digital and the digital to the analog audio. So inside every audio interface, there's a component that turns analog into digital audio and digital audio into analog audio. So there are two separate components that do that. There's also microphone preamps. Mm-hmm. So microphones tend to have very low signal levels. So you need to have a preamp to make those a lot louder, basically. Mm-hmm. And then there's also kind of all of the other connections that you have. Sometimes they have digital audio connections. Sometimes they've just got analog audio connections. And then all of the controls on the front panel that kind of just give you some extra features and some extra controls.
Cool. I guess some people talk about seeing your interface as a kind of sound card, and your laptops, I guess, have a sound card, which is an audio interface in a way. In which situation would you kind of then go out to buy an interface when technically there is one in your laptop?
Yeah, so you can just listen to music and sometimes even record music without having an audio interface if you have USB mics and things like that. I think the next stage for actually purchasing an audio interface is when you want to. The issue is doing it through your laptop can be difficult to kind of monitor what you're recording. So it can be difficult to listen to what you're recording without too much latency. So latency-y being the kind of delay between when something happens and when you hear it in your headphones. So if that's too long, then it can be very off-putting as a musician, especially as a singer. So having an audio interface kind of allows you to solve all of those problems, really. And it also it's going to give you a bit of a higher audio quality as well. And it gives you a lot of flexibility with what kinds of equipment you can plug into it. So you can buy any kind of microphone and plug that into your interface, or you can buy any kind of speakers or any kind of headphones, and it will all be there as part of your audio hub, if that makes sense.
Yeah, cool. So you mentioned having the interface will reduce your latency that you might experience when you're recording something. So would you say that it reduces the load on your CPU as well, having an audio interface?
Not specifically. So it doesn't necessarily reduce the load on your CPU. It's more that the audio can kind of pass through the interface a lot kind of quicker without having to go through the computer. So a lot of interfaces have a feature called like direct monitoring. So if I'm using it at the moment. So if I'm talking into this microphone, it would take a long time for the sound that's going through the interface to then go through the computer, to come back out of the computer into the interface and into my headphones. So the interface itself has a little kind of mixer thing, which allows you to take the live signal from your microphone into your headphones directly without going through the computer first. So that helps so you can listen to stuff in real time. So that's something that doing it through the computer doesn't quite have. It's not necessarily a processing thing, because obviously the computer's still having to load the DAW and the plugins and whatever else you're running. But I think it's more like a timing thing.
Cool. You've answered a question that I was going to ask later on. So that's good. That's good. Yeah. So we talked about the different elements that you mentioned that you will see in most audio interfaces. If you're kind of going out and looking for a first interface, what kind of are the main things that you need to think about, would you say?
So it depends a lot on what you are doing as a musician. So I'd say, and it depends on how much recording you've done before as well. So I'd certainly say for someone who's starting to record and hasn't done loads of it before, probably the most important thing is getting an interface that's going to allow you to focus on the music. So not something that's super technically complicated, that requires a lot of setup, that requires a lot of extra cables and equipment and things like that. Something that can just get you up and running very quickly and very easily is going to be better, because it's going to allow you to focus on the music and not spend a long time setting up all the technology. Because even though I find it really interesting, it's not exactly very good when you're trying to record a music and you've got a creative idea and then you can't get it to work. It's just not something you really want. So I definitely say, for starting out, pick something simple and not too complicated. And then aside from that, it's kind of about what kinds of connections you need. So the most obvious one is microphone preamps. So you need to think about how many different microphones you're going to need to plug in at the same time, basically. So if you're just recording vocals and guitar and doing those separately, you can probably get one with 2 preamps and that will be fine. If you're recording full bands or drums, then you might want to go for something with 8 preamps.
Mm-hmm. So when you say preamps, you mean the inputs and the amp for each one?
Yes. So when I say preamps, I mean the individual microphone preamps. So every microphone will need to be plugged into an individual preamp. So if you have 4 mics, then you need 4 preamps. So it's basically just how many you need to record at the same time. Obviously, you can overdub things, so you don't need to have the same number of preamps as tracks.
Yep. Okay, cool. So you said the number of preamps or things that you want to record at one time, simplicity, so not to get too overwhelmed. So would you say they are the kind of 2 main things to consider?
Certainly for starting out, if you've already done a bit of recording and you kind of want to take your recordings to the next level, then obviously you might want to think about a slightly higher audio quality. Mm-hmm. So you can have a look at all the manufacturers will publish the audio specs of their interfaces, and you can start to, if you spend a little bit more money, then you can get some improvements in audio performance there. Looking at the specs, that can be quite technically complicated, but in general, it helps to give you a bit of an idea of which ones have higher audio quality over others. Although I'd say that if there's any kind of very small changes, that it's probably not going to be audible. Mm-hmm. And then there are also other features that different manufacturers' interfaces give you. So, for example, all the Focusrite interfaces have a feature called Air. So that's really great for recording vocals, because it adds a bit of high frequency information to your recording. So it gives you that nice sort of sibilant sound and sort of nice bright vocals.
I was going to ask you about that actually, because before this episode, I was kind of having a look at the new Focusrite interfaces, and I did see this Air button quite often, and I was like, I wonder what that is. And especially in kind of more modern and pop vocal recordings, I feel like there seems to be this kind of boost quite often in that really high register. So it's really cool that that's being introduced into the recording as maybe one thing you have to do less in post-production.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really nice way of getting that kind of modern vocal sound without having to spend a long time doing it with a plugin later. Like, it's already there. It's just one button. You just turn it on or you turn it off. There's no, it doesn't take very long to do that. It's very nice and easy. So it's a really nice feature for vocals. I use it quite a lot, and it's it sounds really nice.
Yeah, that's really cool. And another thing is, often in interfaces, you will see like an instrument button. And can you explain what that does and how is that different to not having that on, and when would you use it?
Yeah, absolutely. So instruments like electric guitars, they are at a different level to the line level that the interface wants to receive. So they will also need to be amplified kind of like a microphone. The instrument level switch also changes the impedance of the input, which is to kind of match what the electric guitar is sending out. So impedance is kind of frequency dependent resistance, and the instrument will be giving out a different impedance level to a microphone, which is why you need to have that switch.
I see. Okay. So you would always have it off when you're using a microphone?
Yes, absolutely. So if you have a microphone, you put the input into mic mode. And when you plug an instrument in, you'd have it in instrument mode. And if you plug in a line level signal, like something like a piece of outboard gear, like a hardware compressor or something, then you would have it in line mode.
Yeah, I very rarely actually record anything but vocals. So I've never really experimented with that, to be honest. And actually, you mentioned another point there, which does it really matter which cable you're using, whether you're using a microphone or an instrument? I mean, I've got a XLR to XLR for my mic, but you do often see like XLR to the 1/4-inch jack. Does it make a difference which one you use?
So for XLR and a 1/4-inch, which is a TRS 1/4-inch, so there's two different kinds of 1/4-inch connectors, and they look very similar, so you might not have noticed it, but there are on a what we call a TRS, so tip ring sleeve connection, there's actually like two lines on the actual jack, whereas on a sort of guitar cable, which is a TS cable, there's only one line. So for the 1/4-inch connections, yes, that makes a difference. So if you're plugging in a guitar, then you want to use one with only one line along the connector. And if you're plugging in any kind of professional audio equipment like a headphones or anything like that, or like an outboard piece of gear, you're going to want the TRS, the one with the two lines.
Right.
But in terms of is a TRS 1/4-inch any different to an XLR? No, the audio is exactly the same. It's just you need to get the right shape at the end of the cable, basically, to plug in whatever you're receiving. I find this quite a lot with speakers, that some speakers have XLR connections and some speakers have 1/4-inch connections, and then your interface, sometimes the outputs are 1/4-inch and sometimes the outputs are XLR. So you have to just kind of look at the equipment that you've got and find out what you need. Luckily, you can buy XLR to 1/4-inch cables to help out. So but the actual signal level is not going to be any different.
That's good to know. So if you are new to production and you kind of have maybe a mic and one instrument, do you have a recommendation for like a good interface to start with?
Yeah, definitely. So I think for that setup, something like a Scarlett 2i2 or a Scarlett Solo would be a really, really good interface to get started. What's really great about those interfaces is they have a very, very easy kind of getting started walkthrough mechanism. So as soon as you plug the interface in, it kind of tells you how to get started and how to plug everything in and how to make everything work. So that's really nice and allows you to just focus on the music. And that should give you plenty of connections to record like one instrument and one vocal at the same time. Yeah, I'll talk a bit about the Claret range. So that's kind of the next step up from the Scarlett range. So our Scarlett interfaces are really great for people who are just getting started with recording. They might not have done too much recording before, and it's a really easy entry into recording, basically. There's a lot of provisions that we've made to help people get up and running really quickly, and it's supposed to be super easy. Claret's kind of the next step up from that, which gives you higher quality audio, and it's kind of for the people who've just want to take their recordings to the next level, want to get a bit higher quality sound. And so that's what I'm using today. So the 2 pre USB is the 2 pre version, and then we also have a 4 pre and an 8 pre.
Oh, okay. Oh, cool. Yeah, good to know. Yeah, so I think we've gone through most of the things to consider, I guess, when purchasing an audio interface. Another question that I've seen come up a couple of times is people seem to get confused between a mixer and an audio interface. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So I can totally understand why that's a bit confusing. I certainly, when I was starting out, was found that a bit difficult to get my head around. So the word mixer can mean quite a lot of different things. It's a word that just gets used quite a lot. So
Yeah.
I guess technically it means taking a lot of source signals and sort of putting them together and then outputting them somewhere. That could be in the form of like a big console. So you actually have a physical console where you mix all this stuff together, or it can be kind of in other products. So your DAW is a mixer as well. A lot of modern audio interfaces have mixers in them as well, and essentially it just kind of takes all of the inputs and then puts them to different outputs, and then the user can choose which inputs go to which outputs and how many of them combine together into one output and things like that. So essentially any time that multiple signals are coming together and being mixed together in some way, that is a mixer, and there's just lots of different formats of it.
Yeah. Right. Okay, cool. But so I guess a mixer wouldn't really do your job of recording something, which is probably where they differ.
Yeah, definitely. So I think that's something that it can be confused, especially when you see those pictures of really professional studios with huge consoles.
Yeah.
So all the mixer is doing is bringing all of the signals together and then sending them to different outputs. It's not recording anything. It's just kind of distributing the audio, if that makes sense. So an interface, the part of the interface around that kind of lets you plug your interface into your computer, and then your computer is actually the thing that's doing the recording. So your audio interface isn't doing any recording either. It's just giving the computer what it needs, basically.
Yeah. To facilitate
Yes.
the recording to happen, I guess. Yeah.
It's kind of like, the best way I can think to describe it, and I feel like I should have said this in my one sentence description, is like when you have a computer and you have loads of USB things that you want to plug in, but your computer hasn't got enough ports, you get like a USB hub, and then all of the USB signals come together at this hub, and then the computer gets them all at the same time. It's just like a giant audio hub, basically.
Oh, cool. I like that definition, actually. Yeah, that's seems like a good way to put it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we've covered most of the general things, I guess, that I wanted to talk about with audio interfaces. And then we had a couple of questions from our audience as well. So we had one from Sam Warren. So she asked, what makes a high quality interface as opposed to a more low quality interface? And what do you need to look out for in your recording to tell the difference between the two?
Okay, yeah, that's a great question. So obviously there's loads of audio interfaces out on the market, and it can be quite difficult to differentiate between them. So as you start to go up the price ranges, so as things start to get a bit more expensive, you will start to see an improvement in audio quality is probably the most obvious thing that will differentiate higher quality audio interfaces from the more kind of entry level ones. So that'll be things like higher quality microphone preamps, higher quality analog to digital and digital to analog conversion. So in general, it's kind of creating higher quality audio. That's not to say though that some of the lower price ones aren't good enough at all. Like these days, I mean, loads of these interfaces, they all make really great quality audio. It's just that obviously if you want to take it to that next level, then that's where you start to spend a bit more money. The other thing that some of the more higher priced interfaces have is like more professional connections. So sometimes they have things like audio over IP, so sending audio over network cables. And that's something that you tend to see on the more kind of professional interfaces. And they also will have more features as well. Typically they end up having more features. It depends a lot on kind of what you need, really. So if you really need some of those features, then that might be the interface for you. But if you don't actually need those extra connections, those extra features, then some of the lower priced interfaces would be completely fine.
And do you have any particular advice on what exactly you're looking for in the recording to kind of tell the difference, or is it just clarity based mainly?
Yeah, so a lot of these, it's kind of quite difficult to hear a lot of the changes. So if you can always compare two interfaces and record something through both of them and then have a listen to the difference. So in terms of looking at in the recording, it's going to just be kind of a subjective, like what you hear basically. So once you start to add lots of tracks together, you'll start to hear a high quality group of recordings as opposed to a lower quality group of recordings. So especially something that could be an issue if you have a low quality interface or low quality recordings is every single track that you record will have a very low level of noise on it. But the more that you start to build that up, it can become more noticeable. I wouldn't say that it's noticeable in that you hear the noise really obviously most of the time, but I think it's kind of more like a subconscious thing that you kind of feel.
Yeah, I guess we were talking about noise floor in our episode on microphones, and our guest Dan Cox was talking about how that's basically the noise of the electronics in the microphone. So I guess that would be something to consider in every element of the recording, isn't it? So not only the microphone, but also the interface and every other piece in that circuit.
Yeah, absolutely. So every piece of audio equipment adds a little bit of noise. And as you start to build up, so the microphone's going to add some noise, then the preamp will add some noise, and then the conversion. But generally in modern interfaces, these are incredibly, incredibly low levels of noise. But yes, every single piece of equipment will add a tiny bit of noise. It's generally with modern interfaces, you don't need to be like too overly worried about differences between them of maybe like an extra couple of dB of noise or something.
Yeah.
You're not necessarily going to hear that. I mean, most modern audio interfaces are down in the sort of minus 120, minus 130 dB of noise on the preamps. So it's pretty low.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, no, good to know. And the next question we had from a Rosalia Kingst. So Rosalia asked, do interfaces work with all mics and instruments, and are certain interfaces better for certain types of recordings?
That's a really good question. So in general, yes, all microphones will work with all audio interfaces as long as you're connecting them in the right way. I know that in the microphone episode you talked about phantom power and making sure that you're applying that to the right mics and everything. So as long as you've done all that correctly, you can plug any microphone into any interface, and you don't have to have a really professional interface to have a really expensive mic. It will all work fine. And I've forgotten the other second half of that question. What was the second half of that question? Sorry.
Oh, no, that's right. If certain interfaces are better for certain types of recording.
So I think, again, it comes back to kind of what your workflow is, really. I think there are certain interfaces that are better for certain kinds of workflow. So, for example, if you do a lot of recording like remotely, so if you're traveling to lots of different places to record, you might want to have something that's smaller and kind of gets up and running quicker and things like that. Whereas if your interface stays in the studio all the time, there might be some extra features you might want. Like, for example, if it's on your desktop, then you might want to be able to have access to those controls quite quickly if it's staying on your desk the whole time. I wouldn't say that there's necessarily interfaces that are like bad for any kind of application. They can all record all kinds of music, all kinds of spoken word. It just depends on your workflow, really.
Okay, cool. That makes sense. Yeah, so that kind of wraps up what we wanted to talk about. So thank you so much for your time. And yeah, it's been incredible. And I hope you continue to be creative during the lockdown and outside of that. And have a great day.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Pleasure.